I apologize that mine looks like I've only gotten a couple hours sleep.
Because you only got a couple hours of sleep. Well, we're going to start with one on Twitter. I'm sure over the last few weeks you've been asked everything in between what you're willing to share with us and what you refuse to share with us. We might not get any new answers. But of Winterfells on Twitter asks if Frank and Claire had to choose between their goals and power or their marriage, if it was one or the other, what do you think they would choose?
uh, when you guys marathon the second half of the season, I think that you'll have an answer to that question. Um, Obviously, power is very important to them. Obviously, their marriage is very important to them. When they're working well together, they make each other stronger. And as you just saw in episode 6, when they're not working well together, they can be a liability to each other. And all I'll say is that we explore that even more in the next 7 episodes.
Hi, Beau. This is Ihor Gauda.
Hi.
We've got a couple of quick questions for you. One's about casting. I think Kevin Spacey is obviously a great bit of casting if you could get him, which you obviously did get him. But who was the genius that decided to cast Robin Wright as Claire?
That genius was Eric Roth. Eric Roth is one of the original 4 EPs on the show. Initially, it was me, Fincher, Eric Roth, and Josh Donnan. And Eric wrote, among other things, Forrest Gump. So he had worked with Robin when she played Jenny. And at the time, Fincher was working with Robin on Dragon Tattoo. So as we were talking about who would play Claire, Eric suggested Robin. Fincher thought it was a great idea. Josh and I agreed, and then began the process of wooing her. And luckily, we were successful.
Yeah, thank you for that. And second question is, a few days ago, David Axelrod was here in Austin as part of a book tour, and he mentioned that he's gotten completely out of politics now, out of campaigning, out of being a White House advisor, and I'm just wondering if you've given any thought to maybe recruiting him as a script consultant or something.
Well, I think, first of all, I don't believe him. I've known a lot of people in politics like Axelrod who swear that they're going to leave it forever, and they always find themselves roped back in. It's a pretty seductive and addictive lifestyle. If he truly is hanging up the hat for good, I think probably the last thing he'd want to do is have to deal with all the same issues that he's dealt with for the past 6 years, but in make believe. So maybe we'll give him a little respite.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex. I've really
Hey,
enjoyed the
Alex.
music in the series, and I was wondering, now that there have been a couple seasons under your belt, has the music inspired you when you're working on it? Do you listen to music? Do you go to the recording sessions, things like that?
Well, it absolutely inspires me. Jeff Beal, who composes all the music for House of Cards, is an incredible talent. Fincher gets the credit for bringing him on board in season 1. Fincher, and I talked about it as Beal started to put together sketches, which eventually became the theme music for the opening credits, and those motifs sort of bled their way into the rest of the series. We wanted something that had energy but also was ominous, something that had a lot of rhythm to it, and tension to it, and I think Jeff pulls that off extraordinarily well. At the top of each season, I'll talk to Jeff about what's going to happen that season, what we want to explore thematically in terms of the emotional journeys of the characters, and he starts putting together sketches, and we'll talk about those, and then with each episode, I will talk to him about what we're trying to achieve, and 99% of the time, what he composes first time around is spot on. Occasionally, I might have a note or two, but his instincts are fantastic. Not just for where he puts music, but also for where he doesn't put music. And I think one of the things you'll notice with Jeff's music over the course of 3 seasons is that he sort of has a core set of motifs that he'll use, that he'll return to, but with variations. And then with each season, he's also expanding that repertoire and trying new stuff. He doesn't just recycle the same music over and over, which I think a lesser composer might be tempted to do.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I've really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next few episodes.
Thank you, man.
Hello. We have another question from Twitter. This is from @WonderingC. She wants to know if next season will be the last because A Deck of Cards has 52 and each season is 13 episodes.
Well, I appreciate the numerology. We haven't even announced a 4th season. So when it comes to how many seasons of House of Cards there may or may not be, I'll have to steal a line from Francis Urquhart and Francis Underwood. You might very well ask that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Thanks.
Hi. I was wondering, with your experience with DC and with politics, what you felt was the most realistic part of the show and the most unrealistic part of the show.
First of all, I like your shirt. It's appropriate, being that I'm that I'm sitting here in London right now. The most realistic and the most unrealistic. It's tough to say what the most. I guess you mean the most realistic in terms of the way DC works, or yeah, okay. I mean, we take great pains to be as authentic as we can with all of the political stuff. Of course, there are times when we fudge the rules. We have to exaggerate or accelerate things for the sake of dramatic expediency. But we have experts coming in all the time to talk to us to make sure that we get all the details right. Interestingly enough, something that a lot of people think might not be too realistic, but actually is super realistic. In season 2, if you remember in the 3rd episode, Francis comes into the Senate, takes it over, and starts pulling all these parliamentary tricks. The GOP senators end up getting handcuffed and brought into the chamber. A lot of people thought that was totally unrealistic. That, in fact, actually happened in the 80s. And we didn't do it exactly the way it happened in the 80s, but senators were in fact compelled to come back, were brought in against their will, in handcuffs. It was more political theatrics than anything, but the Senate parliamentary rules actually have stipulations about how to compel senators to come back and to arrest them if necessary. And we spoke to the Democratic Senate parliamentarian who had been the expert for the Democrats for 35 years in the Senate about exactly how that would go down. So all of that is deadly accurate. In terms of the most unrealistic thing, well, it kind of depends on how you look at it. A lot of people would say it's pretty unrealistic for someone who's about to get sworn in as the vice president to push someone in front of a train, and I would say that that's probably true. It is somewhat unrealistic because I highly doubt any presidents or vice presidents, for that matter, have murdered anyone with their own hands. At the same time, what we were trying to do there was speak to the sort of truth of Frank's character. I mean, we're looking through an extreme dark lens with him, and it was important to be able to dramatize his willingness to do anything in order to achieve power. So in terms of the story, that was realistic to his worldview. So there's kind of 2 different types of authenticity. One is factual authenticity, and the other is the authenticity of character. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hey, Beau. We have another question from Twitter from
Hi, Twitter.
Yeah. And she wanted you to just sort of talk about how you tried to convey Claire's sort of rise to power this season visually and with symbolism and stuff like that.
Okay, well, will you read the exact question? Do you have it?
Yeah. Did you intentionally try to convey visually and symbolically that Claire was becoming much more powerful?
The short answer is yes. In terms of becoming much more powerful, that's a complicated question because we see her initially fail. Oh, first of all, she has to get past Frank's doubts in order to get nominated in the first place. We see her fail to get confirmed. She has to ask him, much to her own sort of disgust and embarrassment, to do it, ask him to do it for her. And then once she is in a position of power, limited power as the UN ambassador, we see her flail a little bit. I mean, I'm sure that we will get criticism for season 3 about her being too inexperienced in order to be the UN ambassador. That would never happen, and she herself, acknowledges this when she talks to Hector Mendoza and says, "I know what the criticism will be: inexperience, nepotism, that I'm a dilettante." It's one of the reasons she loses her confirmation bid. But if you look at sort of similar analogies in history, like Hillary Clinton with healthcare at the start of the Clinton administration, we all know now that she was perfectly capable of handling that. She's extremely smart and experienced woman, but at the time there was a hell of a lot of doubt as to whether she should be running that initiative, and in fact it did ultimately backfire on the Clintons. But you could go way back farther in history to say Woodrow Wilson after he had his stroke, and Edith Wilson, who had never held a single office in her life, becoming de facto president for a while. So I don't think that's so unrealistic necessarily, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult for her, and I think there's an ebb and flow to her power this season that also at times puts her in direct conflict with Francis, as you just saw. It is not particularly politically savvy to do what she did in Moscow, but she felt compelled by something deeper within her to do what she did. So expressing her own individualism and how that works with and against her own rise to power is one of the things that we're exploring in depth this season. In terms of visually, that's an interesting question. I mean, every director that I work with on an episode has their own visual style. We sort of have a core aesthetic that they all more or less stick to. We've always seen Claire in her sort of statuesque way with her strong silhouettes, her muted tones in her style, and so I think that pervades all 3 seasons. But yeah, I mean, we do spend more screen time with her this season, and we do give her the opportunity to sort of express herself between the lines in a lot of close-ups that Robin is so luminous in.
Great, thanks.
You can tell I'm drinking a lot of coffee because I'm really babbling. You guys can tell me to shut up and move on if I start to bore you.
Hi.
Hey.
So we just spent the last 6 hours binge watching the show. It was great, but this show is pretty famous for inviting people to do the same, and I think more than any other show, a lot of people binge watch this show. So do you take that into consideration when writing it, and do you think it allows you to make it more complicated because everyone has all this momentum going into it? Yeah.
It's a great question. People ask me that a lot, so I put a great deal of thought into it. If I'm truly honest, the fact that the show is binged by a lot of people doesn't affect the writing all that much. And the reason for that is this. While all of you binged, and a lot of other people out there in the world are binging, a lot of people have already finished the season. Some are in the midst this weekend of binging and finishing it by Sunday. There's a hell of a lot of people that don't binge, that do space it out over time. So it has to be able to work both ways. If you look at a lot of great shows from television past, whether it was The Sopranos or Breaking Bad or The Wire, 6 Feet Under or Mad Men, or any number of shows, if you're like me, you may have actually binged those shows before binging was even a term. I watched the first 3 seasons of Sopranos. I didn't get hip to it until 3 years in. I watch them on demand and through box sets. So those stories were not written to be binged because the concept didn't really exist, and they were released week to week, and yet they worked as a binge because they were great stories. So our goal is just to tell a great story, and a great story should work on a binge, and it should also work as a non-binge. I think it's most analogous to a novel. If an author writes a novel, they have no control over whether someone's going to read it in one sitting in the quietude of their living room, or they're going to read it 10 minutes here and there, maybe on the subway to work in a loud, bustling environment. They absolutely have no idea, and neither do we. And yet that novel or that season has to be able to work both ways. I will say, one caveat to that, though. Because we do see it more as a sort of, each season as a sort of film or novel, we don't necessarily feel the need to have big giant cliffhangers at the end of every episode that will sort of compel someone to remain excited until a week from now when they can watch another episode. It does allow us to not be as concerned about reminding the audience of certain things that might, for them, have only been 4 or 5 hours before if they're binging. For those that don't binge, we just give them the benefit of the doubt. We assume they have good memories, they're smart people, and something that might have only been mentioned once, 5 episodes, they're likely to remember. I'd rather give the audience the benefit of the doubt about that rather than sort of beating them over the head with reminders that eat up important dramatic real estate.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Beau.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Walita, and I was thinking this after season 2, so I'm going to ask you. I know you can't tell me too much about the rest since we haven't seen the rest of season 3, but my question is wondering why the Rachel character was not dealt with and killed off like the rest of the loose ends. How Frank and Doug, they killed everyone else that was a threat, and they left her to come back. So that really was bothering me.
You have very strong opinions about Rachel.
I do. So I know you can't tell me too much, but I just have been thinking that, and I'm taking this opportunity to ask you.
Well, it's a great question, and as we all saw at the end, as you all saw at the end of season 2, Doug Stamper was not able to really take care of business. And I think for me, one of the more exciting things to explore in season 2 was this very conflicted and complex relationship he had with Rachel that he couldn't quite articulate. I mean, was it more fatherly? Was it sexual? What was it exactly? And I don't think he fully knew. All he knew is that he cared about this young woman in a way that made it impossible for him to simply do away with her. He found himself protecting her. Now it's very fucked up. I mean, the way that he's protecting her. But in his mind, I think it's sort of as close as he could come to care and affection. And that proved to be a weakness for him, at least in the land of Underwood. And yet at the same time, it made him more human. This sort of machine-like, loyal foot soldier that we had seen in season 1, his loyalty was being indirectly challenged by the existence of this girl that he couldn't just easily get rid of, and he paid the price for it. And so you're right, it is a loose end going into season 3, and as you've seen over the first 6 hours, there's some attempt being made to find her. All I can say is that you will probably have some form of resolution which you will either like or not like sometime before the end of the season.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Another Twitter question. If anybody is tuned in online, it's very specific to one of the episodes we just watched. If you haven't watched it online, maybe mute your Google Hangout. But at LeBron Ovid asks, how did the church scene in Chapter 30 come about, and what does it signify?
Ooh. This is one of those questions that is, I love this question, but I'm almost like more interested in what the audience has to say about it than what I can say, because I feel like if I overanalyze it for you guys too much, I'm sort of indoctrinating you with what you should be thinking. And I don't think that you should be thinking one particular thing. I think that if there's a sort of diversity of reactions to that episode and what happens in the church, that's far more exciting to me. I will say on a broad note that we've always been interested in Frank's relationship to God, or the lack of God in his belief system. We've seen him go to church before, when he was dealing with Russo's suicide/death. We've seen him in Gaffney giving his sermon, if you want to call it that, to the parents of the girl who had died staring at the peachoid. I think that in that episode in particular, he's grappling with notions of justice. He takes a different tack than he normally would in the way that he handles the Supreme Court justice. I think he's trying to be bigger and trying to experiment with some level of ethics or morality, which is quite foreign to him. And I think that that's because he finds himself occupying an office where the responsibilities that are heaped on his shoulders necessitate that he consider things like justice and what's right and what's wrong. And what he discovers by the end of the episode is that he is not built for looking. He's not built to look at the world through that lens. So, if anything, he feels punished by his own weakness in that episode for experimenting with morality, and I think he needs to confront that head on in a way that can sort of ignite him into the Francis Underwood of old, and we see what happens when he literally gets up in God's face. But that energy that he comes out of the episode with is sort of what propels him into stealing a few $1 billion from FEMA in the next episode. I will say this, that religion is something that you will see us exploring in subsequent episodes, particularly in the next episode, episode 7, in ways that you might not expect. And that confrontation with God in episode 4 will kind of boomerang back for him in episode 8. So the story's not quite done on the cage match between Francis and Jesus.
Well, this actually kind of leads into my next question, which is, do you think that Frank Underwood is going to be a good president, or do you think that he's better behind the scenes as a puppeteer, more effective when he's actually behind the scenes?
That's one of the very first questions we asked ourselves in the writers' room as we started season 3, and we wanted to be honest with the reality that we had set up. Now, you all saw it. A lot of people love this moment. He walks in the Oval Office at the end of season 2, slowly sort of takes his place behind the desk, and then does his knock knock in black. We're done. Now, a lot of people may have expected that we were going to go into season 3 and see Francis kick ass and be his usual invincible self. But when we really thought about it, we thought that would be false. I mean, this is a guy who's tarnished because of the Walker administration scandal. He occupies this office without a single vote having been cast for him. The Republicans control both houses of Congress. It would be, I think, a complete lie to the reality that we had set up narratively to see him simply excel from the get-go. And I'm sure there will be some people that are disappointed or take issue with the fact that Frank and Claire this season are vulnerable, that they do stumble. But if they didn't, and if we didn't see that side of them, what would the fucking point of doing the show be? Because then we'd just be regurgitating what we've seen them do in seasons 1 and 2. And I'm not so interested in that. Some people may just want to see him being his Machiavellian self, kicking ass all the time. But I think for the characters to develop and for us to learn more about them, we have to see them under a great amount of stress. We have to see them facing internal and external conflict that they can't always overcome. And if Francis seems more mortal and human as a result of that, all the better. Because then we're starting to see shades of him that we haven't seen before. So to answer your specific question, is he better in the spotlight as president or better in the shadows? I think that he has a natural efficacy in the shadows. We've seen that for 2 seasons, but he doesn't have the luxury of the shadows now. And the question is, can he adapt to the spotlight? And at first, at least, and maybe for quite a while, that's going to be pretty rocky. I'll use one example though. I mean, if you look at JFK's first year, nice try. You were like, I'm about to ask a question. JFK's first year, 1960. A lot of people think of JFK as a sort of hero, an iconic president, but his first year was absolutely disastrous. I mean, he had barely won the election, arguably bought the election, or his father did. Between the Cuban Missile Crisis and a complete failure to unlock the gridlock that was Congress back then, and their gridlock was just as bad as ours is now, he really accomplished nothing. And people thought, oh, maybe we'd made a mistake hiring this 42-year-old inexperienced playboy. He ended up making great strides in the subsequent 2 years before he was assassinated, but there was no signs in that first year for JFK that he would be a great president. One could even make the same arguments about Abraham Lincoln in his first year or two. All right, your turn, Yellow.
Hey, Beau, I'm Tiffany, and we've had a great time here.
I know, you're Tiffany, but it was more fun to call you Yellow.
Oh, call me Yellow.
You like my owl playing a turntable shirt? I've got some yellow too.
I do like your owl. I just wanted.
You don't have to lie.
Hey, you don't either. I wanted to ask for some aspiring writers how you've got a complex plot, you've got a lot of parameters writing for TV. I'm just curious how far out you plot at a time. Like how far out do you write your plot?
The first 6 weeks of a season is spent working on something we call the grid. So we draw a sort of looks like let's see here. Do I have a pen? Oh, fuck it. I don't have a pen. Anyway, imagine a grid. All right. And there's 13 columns and a number of rows, and each of those rows represents either a different character or storyline. So, for instance, we would have a Francis row and a Claire row and a Stamper row. We might have like a Russia row or an America Works row, and we look at the entire season, all 13 episodes, row by row, and we start mapping out big story points along the way. So I knew when we started. Oh, I can't tell you because you haven't seen the end of season 3. Well, let me use season 2 as an example. We knew that Francis would become president at the end of season 2. So Francis, in the box under 13, you put Francis becomes president. Also knew that Doug Stamper was going to get, whether hit by a rock or cut by a piece of glass or shot in the face, whatever it was, we didn't know how yet, was going to be left for dead at the end of the season. We put that at the end of Stamper's thing. You start to go through and put these sort of big moments up in the grid, and then you start to sort of fill in all the gaps, and then you start to sort of think about what is the sort of main theme or idea of each of these episodes. And slowly but surely, with a lot of bad ideas that are thrown out, and the few that make it onto the board, and some erasing here, and moving this over here, and moving that over here, a season starts to take shape. And about 4 weeks into that process, we have a full grid, and we do these mini outlines for each of the episodes. Those are about 4 or 5 pages long, and by the time we finish this document, we've got about 60 or 70 pages, what we call the Bible, of what this whole season's going to look like. Now, that's not just the things that happen. It's also us making note of what's going on emotionally with these characters. Like, where do they start out emotionally at the top of the season? Where do we want to get them to? And we remember what their need is, what the thing that they're striving for that season, so that every scene we look at, no matter what episode we're in, is somehow pushing that forward. And so the short answer to your question is we actually have a sense of everything that's going to happen in the season before we even start outlining the first episode. However, as we get into actually breaking those episodes and writing the scripts, we might come up with better ideas. We might push a storyline a little farther back in the season or bring one up. And then once we get into production, I'm responding to what we're seeing in front of the camera with the actors, and I might make changes based upon that. A new idea may sort of pop forth because of what I see Michael Kelly doing in that scene as Stamper. Or you know, I may decide, you know what, this story doesn't have as much, this story arc doesn't have as much electricity or juice as I thought it did, so I sort of want to pare it down and minimize it. So it's a constant revision process, but generally speaking, we have a pretty good idea of where we're going to end and the big things that are going to happen along the way.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So I think this is going to be our last question, but the setup for it is that we were completely derailed from all of our work on Thursday or Friday by your article on Vulture and the reference to the Singularity. It became an entire research project between the two of us for a good 6 hours. So...
Did you know what the Singularity was before that?
I had no idea.
We had no idea. But we
Yeah.
sort of do now.
Your mind's kind of blown, isn't it? Hey, how many people there actually know what the Singularity is?
Clap or
How many hands are up?
We see two hands.
That's it.
Three hands.
Okay.
You know, which is a good, 3%.
Okay, we might have to do a brief explanation of the Singularity, but go ahead, ask your question.
So the question is, in his obsession with power and leaving a legacy, what would be Frank Underwood's feelings on the Singularity, and would he believe in it as a concept?
We've actually discussed this in the room. Yeah, we spent like a whole day and a half talking about this actually at one point. So what is the Singularity? The simplest way to describe the Singularity is that humanity or life in the universe will move beyond biological evolution and into technological evolution. That biological evolution is just sort of one step on a much larger process, and that Ray Kurzweil, who's really been sort of at the forefront of what the Singularity is and can be, there's a great documentary about it on Netflix, in fact, about Kurzweil. Proposes the idea that sometime over the next, say, 20 to 50 years, and he's picked an exact date, computers will become as complex as the human mind. And at the moment that happens, there will be an exponential sort of explosion in computers' ability to be conscious. And so within 10 years of a computer being as complex as the human mind, you'll have a computer or sort of network that has more complexity than all human minds that have ever existed. And that's called the superconsciousness. And the idea is that actually all of us, I mean, every tweet you send, every email you send, every text you send is actually sort of feeding into this vast archive of communal and collective knowledge that will actually sort of be able to recreate your consciousnesses within the superconsciousness once the singularity is arrived at. Meaning that maybe there isn't a heaven, but maybe there is some sort of digital or technological immortality that we will all enjoy, where we, in a Zen-like way, will become one, because we will all have complete access to one another, and everyone will have complete access to us. We'll be both individual and omniscient. Pretty cool stuff. You truly all think I'm crazy now, don't you? And I think that I don't know if Frank Underwood would like sharing his consciousness with the rest of the masses, but I do very much think that he would like the idea of immortality. So I think he would be fine with some sort of vast super consciousness computer as long as he was the one sitting at the keyboard.
Well, thank you very much for joining us at 11 o'clock at night and then 5:15 in the morning and explaining that. Much shorter than my 6 hours on Wikipedia, which just leads you further down holes, in case you ever try that. So yeah, thanks.
Hey everybody, thanks again for coming out and watching the first 6. I hope you enjoyed them. If you didn't, don't say that to anyone. Okay, just lie and tell them that you liked it. And thanks to you, Caitlin and Emily, for making this very cool thing happen. Go ATX! Yeah.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.